Lena Marlowe had the sort of attention that made people joke she'd missed her calling as a proofreader. 17 years with the same man had taught her to read the smallest signals, the way Colin set his briefcase down when the day had gone badly, the precise angle his shoulders took when he was hiding a worry. She could tell a storm was coming from how the wind shifted through the maple outside their kitchen window. She could often tell a lie from how long it took him to answer a simple question. On a drizzly Wednesday, steam curled around her onyx-tiled shower, and Lena tipped a sleek violet bottle into her palm. Nothing. She shook it. A reluctant ribbon of shampoo gathered like honey and slid into her hand, far less than it should have been. 13 days earlier, she'd paid $62 for Aurelia No. 7 Bergamot, and Neroli pH balanced the kind of indulgence she allowed herself twice a year. She'd used it 6 times, maybe 7. The bottle looked as though it had survived a hotel full of guests. She pressed the heel of her hand to the tempered glass, counting backward through the week. Monday, yoga after lunch, quick rinse. Saturday, deep condition sure but not a handful. Sunday, no. She'd skipped a wash hair and a scarf while she baked. The arithmetic refused to make sense. Colin couldn't be the culprit. He'd started shaving his head in his late 30s, and by 44 he had embraced the sheen. He liked the slap and sting of a cedar bar soap, and liked to joke that baldness at least saved him from mortgage-priced haircuts. When friends teased him, he'd rub his crown and say he was aerodynamically sound. Lena rinsed the water, needling her scalp. She wrapped herself in a towel the color of wet sand, and out of reflex set her glasses on her nose as she wiped the mirror. The face looking back had new knowledge written into it, nothing dramatic, just the faint habitual tightening that comes when the world has tilted half a degree. He was already dressed when she reached the kitchen navy suit, white shirt a tie with a careful herringbone that matched his habit of appearing composed. He scrolled as he drank from the heavy stoneware mug Lena had bought on a weekend trip up the coast. The maple hissed rain against the window. "Bathroom stock is evaporating," she said mildly as she measured grounds into the French press. "Have you noticed? Evaporating." He smiled without looking up. "Is that a scientific term or a domestic one?" "The expensive purple bottle," Lena said. "It's almost gone." A pause. Then, "Maybe you're using more than you think." The screen's glow held his attention. "Those salon brands lather weirdly." She stirred. "And the conditioner too, same magic trick." He set the phone down finally, but only for a beat. "Check the cap. I read a form about poor seals. Could be leaking." Into the drain, she lifted an eyebrow. Into the shower caddy. Capillaries. Science. He kissed her temple, a practiced gesture, light and careful. "I've got a 9 o'clock prep and then a client lunch. Don't wait up if I run late." End of quarter marathon. That's the 3rd time you've said that this week. It's the 3rd time it's been true. The smile sharpened with impatience and vanished just as quickly. "Love you." "Love you," she returned, but the door had already closed. She sat with her coffee cooling under the window's gray light and listened to the house breathe. Their bungalow in Rowan Park was tidy in the way of spaces shared by people who negotiated rather than fought his framed race bibs. Down the hall, her 3 ferns basking in the bathroom's eastern sun. They had agreed on no children, then postponed reconsidering until the calendar filled itself. At 39, Lena had the sort of life that looks settled from the outside. She freelanced as a UX designer, toggling between Figma boards and client calls, the cat-like quiet of working from home keeping her nerves smooth. If anything vibrated now, it wasn't the coffee. At noon, she walked the 2 blocks to Alma's Deli for a soup and came back to a parcel on the stoop, clay hairpins she'd ordered from a ceramicist in Oregon. She ran a thumb over their matte glaze and thought absurdly that she wouldn't dare slide them into hair that smelled wrong. She laughed at herself and went back to work. The day lengthened, the rain cleared the bottle in the shower, stayed on her mind like a chord that never resolved. Around 6:15, a text pinged, "Running late. Might crash near the office if it goes late. Don't wait up." Lena stared at the message, then typed back, "Okay, be safe." She ate leftover mushroom risotto at the counterfork, in one hand, tablet propped on a folded kitchen towel. Out of habit, she checked the drawer where she kept bath treats, a row of soap petals, a tin of salt, 2 bath bombs in stiff white paper. 1 bomb was missing. She had used 1 last Sunday. She counted again. 2 had become none. She told herself she'd miscounted. She told herself she was tired. She told herself the house mattered less than the people in it, and the people were busy. The narrative held until she slipped into bed and realized the other half of the mattress would stay cold. The rain had stopped. The streetlights threw faint hexagons on the ceiling. She slept badly and dreamt of unscrewing caps that never opened. At 6:18, the sound of the shower woke her, the water a steady rush that traveled through the house's bones. Colin rarely came home to shower before work if he'd stayed in the city. He liked hotel gyms and the anonymity of the tower's locker room. Lena lay still, watching light bar its way through the blinds and listened to the water drumming the tile. He emerged 20 minutes later with a gray towel slung low and a greeting pitched toward Pleasant. "Didn't mean to wake you." "You didn't," she said, though he had. "How was the hotel?" "Forgettable," he said, pulling a shirt from the closet. "I crashed at midnight, woke up at 5, decided I wanted my own coffee. 8 a.m. deck with legal 10 with the Martin Group. Will you be late again?" "Shouldn't be." He paused, one arm in his jacket. "I can pick up steaks on the way home. Maybe we grill. It's supposed to clear." "Sounds good." She held his gaze this time. He looked back a beat too long, as if measuring something, then nodded, tied his laces, and left without the morning kiss. When the front door settled, Lena walked to the bathroom. The room was still warm with steam, the mirror bloomed with fog, her ferns beaded with water like rainforests after a squall. She reached for the violet bottle, lifted it. Weightless. A single flattened bubble crawled up the inside, then collapsed. On the caddy's wire shelf, a faint slick ring marked where the bottle had rested. The conditioner's line, she had noticed lines without admitting it, had fallen too. The bath bomb paper sat in the drawer like spent fireworks. She wrapped her arms around herself, not from chill, but to keep her hands from acting before her head could think. She placed the bottle back exactly as it had been, turned the fan on with its soft rattle, and stood for a long minute watching steam lift toward the ceiling, as if it might carry the answer with it. The maple outside brushed the glass with new light. In the kitchen, Lena ground beans and pressed coffee with measured patience, then opened her laptop. Her calendar held a wireframe review at 9, a call at 11:30, a delivery window for a package she didn't strictly need at 3. When the water in the kettle hissed and clicked itself off, she set the mug down and drew a small circle on a sticky note, violet ink on pale paper. She stuck the note to the underside of the shower shelf. Nothing visible unless you bent to look, then washed her hands and watched the water spiral away. The day she decided would proceed like any other emails, mock-ups, a late afternoon walk, if the weather stayed honest. On the counter, the steak knife she'd used last night lay parallel to the cutting board, neat as a ruler. Lena nudged it half an inch into alignment, the habit of a person who liked the world to make sense. By 6:30, she had laid the table with off-white plates they almost never used on weeknights, and uncorked a bottle of Montepulciano because if they were going to grill, she wanted to choose the wine. At 7 sharp, Colin came through the door with a butcher's paper pouch and a brighter smile than he'd worn in days. "Look at us," he said, gaze roaming the set table. "Midweek extravagance. Call it a truce with the weather." She brushed his cheek with hers and let him take over the grill while she chopped a salad. For 2 hours they were fluent again. He had stories about office politics. She had one about a client who wanted the CTA to apologize before it asked for a click. The wine loosened their shoulders. The rain smell had gone from the maple. Ordinary life returned, convincing as a magician's coin. It wasn't until she stood at the sink and heard his phone buzz on the counter that the coin flashed its trick. He moved faster than he meant to a quick reach that misjudged nonchalance. By the time she turned, the screen was against his thigh, and his face was all ease. "Work?" she asked, turning back to the tap. "Just a deck question for tomorrow," he said, thumbs busy, timing. She dried her hands on the blue striped towel and nodded, though he couldn't see it. The dishwasher hummed, the house settled, the maple went black against the sky. That night, when the digital clock read 2:17 in unfriendly red, and his breathing had leveled into the long exhale of deep sleep, Lena slid her feet to the floor and crossed the living room for water. On the arm of the sofa, his jacket lay with a practiced carelessness. A rectangle of glass glinted from the inside pocket screen, dark mouth closed. She had never been a person who snooped. She had never needed to be. She did not touch the phone. She drank her water. She stood a long time in the kitchen, listening to the refrigerator's low hum, to the night pretending to be harmless, and then she went back to bed. Morning would bring its own weather. For now, the violet bottle in the steam-soft room felt as loud as thunder, and Lena, who could usually quiet any worry with order, could not make the sound diminish. By morning, the unease had condensed into something with edges. Lena made coffee, answered a client's message about hover states, and moved through the rooms as if she were straightening a set before curtains. The violet sticky circle she'd hidden under the shower shelf yesterday clung where she'd placed it, a private ridiculous marker that nevertheless steadied her. An object in the right place said, "I am paying attention." Colin was already gone, an earlier train than usual, a note on the counter. "Early deck review. Eat the last of the ricotta before it turns. See." The fork he'd left in the sink glinted like a reply he hadn't sent. At 10, she stepped out for air, returned with a bag of oranges, and caught herself measuring the weight as if honest citrus could confirm anything. She laughed under her breath and turned the laugh into work. Figma frames duplicated themselves into neat columns. A header learned restraint. A modal learned when to leave. The day ran quiet until late afternoon, when a courier delivered a package. Colin had ordered a wool scarf in a tasteful charcoal that would join the other tasteful charcoals in the hall closet. She slit the tape, confirmed the contents, and thought about the fact that he'd shipped it home instead of to the office. Small things circled other small things and began to cast a shadow. He texted at 6:15 late again, ordering in with the team. Don't wait up. The message wore its usual aftershave. Lena put her phone face down, ate an egg on toast, and tried to read an essay about the architecture of roundabouts. Words blurred into the same sentence. She washed her plate, turned off lamps one by one, and stood in the bathroom with the fan's soft whir and the knowledge that standing here would not change the volume in a bottle. When night settled into its deepest register and the thermostat hummed a comforting lie, she eased her feet from under the duvet and crossed the house in a slow-lined bedroom hall living room. His jacket lay where he'd left it days ago, a dark swoop over the arm of the sofa phone, tucked in the inner pocket like a sealed thought. She didn't touch it. She stood in front of the bookshelves and read spines. She poured water and drank it cold and metallic and ordinary. The next evening, he came home earlier than she expected. The shoes on the mat made a second pair. He moved through the doorway with that ready smile he used when meetings had gone well. Sushi, he called, lifting a paper bag as if it were a truce flag. They ate across from each other at the island. He told her about an analyst who had misread a dataset and turned a bar chart into a parable. She told him the client had accepted the new sign-up flow with only 2 comments. The ginger seared the roof of her mouth. The ordinary rose up again, fresh and persuasive. When his phone buzzed against the wood, he reached without looking like a man whose hand knew the contour of a familiar door. "Who's on deck tonight?" she asked lightly, rinsing the soy sauce dish. "Ops," he said. "Deadlines. You know how it is." After they cleared the containers and he stepped into the shower, Lena stood at the sink and let the water run a shade longer than necessary. She turned the faucet off and listened. The hiss of the shower filled the house like rain. Steam pressed through the door jamb, warm and undemanding. In the mirror over the sink, her face looked exactly like her face. When the shower cut, she set a towel on the bed and sat on the edge as if she were simply balancing a shoe. He came out howling. His head said something about traffic if he left at 7 and reached for the phone on the nightstand to check a map. Lena watched without moving. His thumb woke the glass. A small square requested a face. He angled the rectangle and the rectangle obeyed. "Can I check a recipe on your browser history later?" she asked. Tone kept casual. "The soup Alma posted I forgot to bookmark." "Use yours," he said, not unkindly, not looking up. "Mine's a mess. Thought you kept ours synced." "I turned that off," he said, as if talking about winterizing the hose line. "Work stuff." She nodded, and in the nod, something old folded itself up and lay down. He slept heavy that night, the way he slept after long days on polished floors. At 2:09, numbers glowed in unwavering red. She lay awake and counted her own breath until counting felt like obedience to a rule she hadn't agreed to. She slid a hand toward his nightstand, paused, and drew it back. When she finally slept, the dream favored doors that couldn't be opened with the keys she knew. The morning after she showered, and with the patience of a jeweler, pulled the violet bottle from the caddy. A line of shampoo clung to the inner wall, thin as a horizon. She set the bottle down and, with a toothpick, placed a pinpoint of clear polish at the exact level. Invisible unless the light hit the plastic and you knew precisely where to look. By lunch, the sky had turned the color of paper. Lena drew a clean hoodie over her head and took the long way to the mall. She didn't like malls. Their air kept one temperature regardless of season, and their music tried too hard to emulate a feeling before you could recognize it. She told herself she was buying a gift for Iris. Iris Park was Colin's younger sister and felt less like an in-law than a co-conspirator at family events. She ran an after-school program that could turn a chaotic gym into a community within 10 minutes. When you told Iris something, she didn't flinch. When you asked her a question, she didn't fill the space with guesses. Lena moved a finger over a display of shampoo bottles and chose the twin of her own, the same violet, the same understated label, because Iris liked nice things, and because it was the excuse she had picked on the walk from the parking deck. At the register, the clerk chatted about sulfates and the revival of cleansing rituals. Lena smiled, handed over a card, and walked into the corridor where musk from the candle shop mingled with butter from the pretzel stand. She stood in the flow of strangers and added a second errand. 3 stores down, a boutique for home gadgets did the kind of sleek surveillance that promised taste. On the 3rd shelf, tucked between a weather station shaped like an egg and a Bluetooth speaker shaped like a pebble, Lena found it a camera disguised as a matte porcelain reed diffuser, ceramic reeds and all. The box showed an app interface with tidy icons and a demo frame of an empty foyer. A prop house idea sold with the cheerful neutrality of a kitchen timer. She took it home in a paper bag that said Loom in the kind of sans serif that implied Scandi Mountains had blessed it. In the bathroom, she rotated objects by a hair, moved the real diffuser to the back corner, placed the camera diffuser where the steam drifted and the caddy was in sight. Set the ceramic reeds with the unconcern of someone who has seen too many magazines. The app connected on the second try. She named the camera Fern because naming a camera felt like giving a cat the name Cat. The view was clean shower tile, caddy mirror edge, with a sliver of doorway, the window where the maples stirred in whatever wind the neighborhood was making. She angled the diffuser a fraction and saw on her phone the caddy straighten into full view. She adjusted the ceramic reeds until their shadows broke the frame like a meridian. She told herself it was foolish and invasive and not like her. She told herself she shouldn't have to tell herself anything. That evening, Colin texted a photo of the team at a long table. Someone had circled a face and drawn a crown. Someone else had added a pizza slice emoji next to a glass of wine. The caption read, "Pretend this is glamorous." He added, "Home late." She replied with a thumbs up and set her phone face down. Sleep fell in pieces that night and woke in pieces in the morning. She showered quickly and glanced purely out of habit at the invisible dot on the bottle. The line had dropped, not by a night's worth of wash, by more. When she lifted the violet sticky circle under the shelf, a faint crescent of moisture had printed its arc. She set it back, pressed it smooth, and stepped out of the shower without rinsing the reveal off the back of her mind. Her work that day refused to distract her. She built wireframes and rebuilt them. She deleted and undeleted color tokens. At one, she texted Iris coffee soon. The reply came 5 minutes later, "Tonight after my shift, not before." "You okay?" Lena typed. "Yes. Rain check if I'm under deadline." She didn't hit send, deleted the line, wrote, "Yes. I just miss your face." That was true. Late afternoon opened like a door she didn't remember unlocking. She took her laptop to a coffee shop 3 blocks away, the one with the baristas who played slow records and didn't force conversation. She chose a table opposite the door, facing away from the street, and opened her browser to a draft proposal. The app for Fern nested itself in a corner of her screen, tiny one eye open. Nothing moved in the bathroom except the Fern's shadow, a soft feathering against tile. She was on her second Americano when a notification bloomed on the glass. Motion detected Fern. The phrase pressed and released the air in her lungs. She tapped and the bathroom swam into focus. Someone had entered the frame. Not Colin. A woman tall, mid to late 20s, blonde, arranged with the effort that makes hair look unarranged, crossed to the counter. She set down a small leather bag without hesitation, the way a person does when they have been told where to put things. She looked toward the mirror, and for a second Lena saw a stranger's face framed by Lena's plants. Lena's tile, Lena's carefully chosen light fixtures. The image wasn't lewd or intimate, it was simply wrong. The woman untied a sash, stepped out of a linen robe, and moved from frame to shower with the casual economy of a person alone. The porcelain reeds didn't tremble. Steam began its slow bloom. An arm reached for the caddy, found the violet bottle with an accuracy that suggested a map. In Lena's ear, the coffee shop's record changed tracks, and someone at the counter laughed. In Lena's phone, the stranger lathered a luxury that wasn't hers. The distance between the screen and Lena's palm might have been a yard or a mile. She forgot the coffee growing colder by her elbow. She forgot the sentence on the proposal that needed a verb. She watched as the unfamiliar hand nails, immaculate tiny half-moons, set the bottle back in its exact notch, like a person who had learned the shelf by muscle memory. The woman turned off the water, reached for a towel, one of theirs. Blue striped the twin of the one in the kitchen and wrapped it with the ease of practice. She stepped from the frame, and the camera recorded tile and steam and a sliver of vanity where the light was kind. Lena closed the feed. The room came backward into hearing frothed milk, the spoon chiming the rim of a cup, a door opening and closing as if it had a quota to meet. Her hands were steady. The steadiness felt detached, like an actor playing a surgeon. She paid left and walked down a side street that smelled like wet cigarettes and florists' buckets. She sat on the curb where the building's shadow gave her shade and did nothing for a full minute. Then she stood, went to her car, and folded the keys into her fist until the metal warmed. She drove nowhere in particular for 20 minutes. Every light on Maple Avenue turned green right before she reached it, as if the city wanted to misinterpret her need for delay as momentum. She turned back toward Rowan Park at a speed the law approved. At the house, the lock turned its normal way. In the living room, the book she had abandoned lay open to a paragraph about traffic circles pretending to be humane. She put the book down as if its spine were delicate and walked to the bathroom. The Fern had taken on a glossy wetness from the shower. The mirror's fog had faded to islands. The caddy looked like a metal-lined drawing order imposed on small bottles and bars. She opened the drawer where she kept extra towels. It smelled like lavender and starch, the bland grace of domestic industry. She took nothing from the drawer. She shut it slowly. In the bedroom, the air still held a faint impression of a perfume she didn't own. A light sweetness, almost clean, as if cleanliness were a fragrance. On the vanity, a single hair lay across her hairbrush, too pale to be hers, too straight to have been there by accident. Her phone buzzed. She looked down and saw the doorbell camera's alert, front door. She tapped. Colin came into the frame carrying a paper bag, and whistling a tune he'd been whistling since college. He let himself in, called out a hello that the doorbell couldn't capture, and walked down the hall, jacket over his shoulder. Lena stayed where she was. She watched the screen she had already closed. Then she opened Fern again. The frame caught him as he stepped into the doorway, his reflection arriving a half-second before his body. The woman stood at the vanity hair, loose head tilted one hand, lifting the line of her jaw the way people do when they assess a new angle. He walked behind her and put a hand, unthinking and familiar, at her waist. In the mirror, his face softened into the expression Lena knew from 100 good mornings. A softness is not a weapon. It is not a defense either. It is a fact. She closed the app. The house existed without photographs. The hallway held its shape. The clock in the kitchen marked time without comment. When he stepped into the living room 15 minutes later, he began with the easiest possible sentence. "You're home," he said, shrugging into the moment like a comfortable coat. "I grabbed pho." Lena looked at him and found that her voice, when it came, belonged to her. "I'm going to see Iris," she said. "I won't be here tonight." He paused, bag still in his hands. "Is everything—" "I'll be back for some things tomorrow." He searched her face. He was not a stupid man. "Do you want me to—" "I don't want anything," she said, and surprised herself by how calm it sounded. "I'll text Iris now." He set the bag down as if the table might reject it. "You don't need to do anything." She walked past him into the bedroom, took her overnight bag from the closet floor. Socks, a sweater, a t-shirt, charger, face wash items gathered, the way you gather for a normal weekend in a place you like. The bathroom mirror reflected a woman packing toothpaste with a careful hand. She turned the fan off, and the quiet that followed was so complete she could hear the maple touching the window in small green notes. In the living room, he had sat down, elbows on knees, hands together like a man about to ask for something. She didn't make it easier. "I'll lock up," she said. "Don't wait up." On the porch, the early evening light felt blunter than it had an hour before. A neighbor waved from her stoop. Lena lifted a hand and waved back. In the car, she sent a message to Iris. "Can I come over? It's me." The reply came at once. "Yes, I'm home." Traffic was kind. At Iris's building, Lena parallel parked in a spot that looked impossible until the car proved it wasn't. Iris opened the door before Lena knocked. She wore an old t-shirt from a fundraiser and socks that didn't match. Iris took in Lena's face and stepped aside without a question. They sat at the tiny kitchen table with mugs of something hot that smelled like chamomile and a lemon rind. Iris waited. Lena set her phone down screen first, then turned it over and laid it flat between them as if it were a neutral witness. "I need a place to sleep," Lena said. "Here," Iris said, "as long as you want." Lena nodded. She looked at the mug, then at the grain of the table where knives had made honest scars cutting bread. "Thank you." They didn't say more for a while. The kettle ticked as it cooled. The city aired out its evening in the open window, distant siren, a laugh from the courtyard, a bike bell. Iris pushed a plate of crackers toward Lena and didn't insist. She let the quiet be what it was, a room that could hold two people without asking either to translate. When Lena finally spoke, she chose a sentence with an ordinary verb. "I saw someone at the house." Iris's mouth compressed, then eased. Okay." On camera, Lena said, "Not him, someone else." "Okay," Iris said again. They didn't name anything. Names came later. The names were obvious. Lena took a second mug, wrapped her hands around it, and felt its heat as if she had been very cold. Iris reached across and touched Lena's wrist, once a tap of recognition, not consolation. In the guest room, the sheets smelled faintly of the detergent everyone bought and swore by for a season. Lena set her bag on the chair and sat on the edge of the bed for a long time without lying down. The room's one small plant leaned toward the window. Cars whispered on the avenue. The weight behind her breastbone felt distributed instead of concentrated, the way a storm feels once it stops deciding whether to begin. She brushed her teeth, washed her face, and placed her phone on the nightstand with the screen down. Then she turned it face up, and with the same small care she had used for the sticky circle under the shelf, opened her photos and moved two icons into a folder she named with a word that would not remind her later of a specific day. The word was plain. The word was hers. She lay down and found sleep in the middle of a sentence, the kind of sleep that arrives not as surrender but as a working truce. The house she had left drew its own breath without her. The maple outside her window at Iris's place touched glass neither of them had chosen. The city clattered and hushed and clattered again. When morning arrived, it did it in the ordinary way. Light through blinds, a kettle beginning to fuss, a phone vibrating once on the table, and then falling quiet. Iris's apartment woke gently, kettle fussing, street noise braided with birds. Lena came up from sleep as if from a deep pool and sat for a moment with the plainness of the guest room, a dresser with 3 scratches, a plant leaning toward the light. The steadiness here did not erase anything. It made space around it. They ate toast at the tiny table. Iris didn't ask questions that were really speeches. She buttered her corner past the jar to Lena and said, "Shower's yours," like a woman who understood the dignity of small instructions. By mid-morning, Lena was at her own sink rinsing a mug that didn't need rinsing. The house held familiar temperatures. The fern in the bathroom still held a gloss from last night's steam. On the caddy, the violet bottle sat in its notch with a meekness that felt theatrical. She cleaned. Not the frantic kind, no scrubbing at ghosts, just a steady reclaiming sheets, stripped towels washed, vanity wiped, brush bristles combed free of pale threads. The mirror cleared in front of her as she worked. The room took on the smell of lemon and cotton. Then she stood with the bottle in her hand and made a choice. She did not measure like a chemist, did not set out beakers or write ratios with a scientist's neat numbers. She poured out a portion of the luxury into the sink and replaced it with a mixture she had obtained from a beauty supply aisle, an innocuous-looking clarifying base, and a depilatory agent disguised by the scent and slip of the original. She shook the bottle until the liquid moved as one. No labels changed. The cap clicked home. The bottle settled back into its place with the quiet authority of an object that expects to be reached for. The drawer of bath treats, once a little shrine to softness, held only wrappers and tissue. Lena tidied those too. She set the camera diffuser's angle a hair to the left. In the app, the frame squared the caddy perfect in its small jurisdiction. Colin texted at noon, long lunch with Martin. "Don't plan on me." She wrote back, "Got it." The message looked like two people coordinating calendars. It was. Work absorbed her for 2 hours. Then at 3, she drove to the grocery and bought a chicken lemons parsley. She found the rhythm of a knife and chose it. At 5, she left everything neat in the refrigerator and returned to Iris's with her overnight bag. "Staying again?" Iris asked, holding the door with her hip. "Yes." Lena set the bag by the shoe rack, and the relief of not inventing further sentences moved through her ribcage like air. They watched half an episode of a show where people renovated houses they couldn't possibly afford. At 9, Lena's phone vibrated on the coffee table. Motion detected Fern. Her thumb tapped without drama. The bathroom came into view. Water began to gather in the corner of the shower glass. Steam. Then a figure slipped into frame towel, then no towel, the white sheer of skin and steam. The hand reached for the caddy and with muscle memory for the violet. Iris didn't look at the screen. She looked at Lena. "Do you need anything?" "No." Lena didn't raise the phone. She watched at a slant. The woman's arm moved in the small insistences of washing. Bottles went down exactly where they'd been. When the towel returned, it was blue-striped, looped with familiarity, and the woman's hair lay along her shoulders like a curtain being closed. The feet held tile. The reed shadows tilted with the air. The steam thinned. Lena closed the app and placed the phone face down, then face up, an unspooling of a habit that had once been trust and had turned itself into evidence. She slept at Iris's like a person who has done the day's work, not more, not less. At dawn, her phone chimed again. Motion detected Fern. She didn't open it immediately. She made coffee in Iris's kitchen and stood with the mug warming her fingers while the city yawned. She opened Fern then and saw Colin in the doorway of the bathroom, phone to his ear voice, animated in a way that had nothing to do with spreadsheets. His hand cut the air, his eyes were a little wild, and then he left the frame. 10 minutes later, a text from him, crisis at work. Heading in early. "Sorry." She replied with the smallest word she could, "Okay." By late morning, her screen lit with a message from Iris, who had run out for pastries on her break, and who seemed to move through the city like a reliable rumor, just saw a woman come out of Meridian Dermatology on Oak. Big hat glasses crying. Probably nothing. "You want a croissant?" Lena typed, "Thanks. Almond, please." She didn't ask Iris to cross the street and confirm anything. She didn't need the universe to triangulate what she already knew. That evening, Colin came home with the dishevelment of a man who has spent the day dragged by events. He ate the lemon chicken as if he were grateful to be told what to do with his mouth. His eyes kept catching at the middle distance where time has no edges. He told a story about a junior analyst who couldn't remember the names of files and named them Final. He laughed, and his laugh sounded like the version of him his friends liked. The house settled around the noise without accepting it. They went to bed. He fell into sleep in one piece. Lena waited not with resentment, just with the patience of a person timing a long exposure. When his breathing had evened to that soft open sound, she slid the phone from his side of the nightstand, angled the glass to his face, and watched the lock dissolve. The home screen held a bright gridwork apps, a meditation app. He never used a folder with a neutral name. Inside that folder, a thread labeled Heart Studio. The icon was a camera. The initials were SH. The last messages stacked themselves like receipts. SH made it home. That shampoo is literal heaven. Hair is stupid soft. Colin told you, chef's kiss. SH, your kitchen is better than my kitchen. I might move in when she's at her sister's. Colin, don't. She's sharp. SH, sharp enough to notice her bottle refills itself. Colin, I'll grab another tomorrow. She won't clock it. SH, you underestimate women, but okay. Lena scrolled. Weeks unfurled. The tone wandered through flirtation into entitlement. Scattered between them were photos cropped to exclude faces and include hand styles the hem of a towel. There were logistics when she would arrive, what door she should use, whose neighbor was home that day. There were sentences that made Lena's mouth taste like the metallic hint after biting your tongue. 2 scrolls up another thread caught her eye, a credit union she didn't recognize. A confirmation message, 6 months old, your new checking account is ready. A later message, transfer scheduled. The sums were small, then larger. The pattern had a rhythm. The rhythm was petty and deliberate. She took screenshots not with nervous taps, but with clean decisions. She moved them into a folder inside a folder on her cloud drive and named it with a date and a word that did not announce itself to anyone glancing. Then she returned the phone to the exact rectangle it had been sleeping in, the exact angle, the way you replace a book on a shelf in a house where someone knows the spine's position by heart. The morning made traffic noises and the coffee machine in the kitchen coughed. Lena showered, glanced at the violet bottle its weight had changed in her hand. It was performing its own honest mathematics and left the house with her laptop and a note to Iris. 2 p.m. appointment on Maple. Coffee after. At 1:55, Lena parked on a side street with a clean sightline to her own front door. At 2:11, a sleek little car purred to a stop by the curb. The blonde from Fern stepped out wearing the kind of sunglasses that are more intention than object. She walked to the door with a key held not like a question, but like a promise. Lena exhaled once. The phone in her hand vibrated, motion detected Fern. She watched the progress as if this were a weather system gliding over a map. The woman set her bag down with practiced intimacy, shrugged out of her coat, and moved through the frame. Steam flowered, the arm reached for the caddy with the comfort of repetition. The bottle tilted. When the shower ended, there was a pause in which the room held a quiet that felt like concentration. The woman stepped to the mirror. She lifted her hand to her hair. Her shoulders went very still, then very tight. She leaned closer. Her mouth open-closed. She pulled a comb through, and the comb snagged. She pulled again, and strands clung and then let go in a way hair shouldn't. Her face in the mirror changed in the particular way people's faces change, when a thing that seems small declares itself not small. Lena closed the app and rested the phone against the steering wheel. The light shifted in the street as a cloud moved. A dog walker went by with 4 regular-sized dogs and 1 ambitious tiny one. The ambition made Lena smile without humor. By 3, she was back at the house. Colin met her in the kitchen with a voice pitched toward business. "How was your appointment?" "Fine," she said, routine. He nodded, his eyes flicked toward the hall and away. His phone buzzed. He palmed it like a coin. There's an issue with... He didn't pick an object. He didn't need one. He grabbed his keys and left the word hanging like a jacket on an invisible hook. In the late afternoon, Iris texted, saw her again. "Hat bigger, glasses bigger. The universe is not subtle. You okay?" Lena wrote, "Yes, thank you." He returned after 7, smelling faintly of the antiseptic soap hospital's favor. He said something about a junior employee who had set a fire he had spent all day putting out. He ate leftovers and stared through the air in front of him. He put his plate in the sink with the care of a man who knows that sound is a kind of confession. The next day was clean and bright. Lena took her laptop to Iris's and they set up at the kitchen table like students. Lena logged into the shared cloud account she had managed for years without ceremony. She went methodically, statements, a spreadsheet he had named Taxes 2019 V2, and never updated a folder called Archive, where nothing went to die and everything went to wait. Transfers appeared with the tidy regularity of a person who thinks a small siphon can pass under the noise floor. Hotel charges and restaurant bills bloomed in months labeled heavy workloads. A tab she hadn't seen before held PDF printouts of articles with assertive headlines about navigating community property. Another, a list of things to remember, included a note about timing conversations and avoiding large purchases ahead of filing. Iris supplied tea and the kind of commentary that wasn't commentary. "Here," she said, passing a pen. "You like to mark things." Lena did. She marked dates, amounts, patterns. She built a ledger in a new document, clean columns, where the mess declared itself by contrast. She printed the most relevant pages on Iris's old laser printer, the one that always turned the corner of the last sheet inward as if shy. She slid the pages into a folder, then into another folder. She saved the digital file to a drive of her own and to a second place. She sent a copy to an email address only she used. When the printer cooled, they watched Fern one last time. Late afternoon light softened the tile. The bathroom door opened. Colin walked in with the woman behind him. Today her hair was hidden under a knit cap. Even so, the edges of what had happened showed at her hairline, a raw newness, a tenderness of skin. She spoke with her hands. He answered with his palms up, placating. She tugged the cap off, and the camera did not flinch. The damage was not theatrical. It was uneven chemical, the kind of wrong that makes strangers look away in public out of respect not to witness. Her voice carried even at a remove. "Do you know what this costs?" she said. Anger braided with fear. "I have a consult in New York, $5,000 just to start. Agencies suspended the next 2 shoots." He said her name then, and it was a real name, Sable. The way he said it had history in it. "I'll figure it out," he said. "Just be careful. She notices." Sable's laugh had no air. "You think the bottle didn't do this by itself?" She set the comb down like a small, sharp declaration. "Fix it." He reached toward her, and she turned away, and for a breath he looked exactly like a man who had discovered that control is a barter, not a possession. Lena closed the app. The screen went black and showed her own face back to her for a second in its reflective calm. She exhaled once evenly. She slid the phone into her bag. Evening peeled itself over the neighborhood. At the house, she moved through rooms that had been returned to order and set a folder on the dining table. She aligned its edge with the table's seam, an old private ritual of getting the lines right. The maple outside the window traced small arcs on the glass. The air held lemon and cotton and a clean quiet that did not ask to be translated. Evening settled with the steadiness of a clock. Lena placed the folder on the dining table and squared it to the seam, an old habit that made edges behave. Lemon and cotton lingered in the air. The maple outside traced its small repetitive alphabets against the glass. Colin came in with a key and a sentence he had used 1,000 times. "Hey." He took in the neat room, the folder, the absence of dinner, and adjusted his face. "Long day." Sit, Lena said. He sat. The chair accepted his weight, the way furniture accepts anyone who asks politely. She opened the folder and slid a stack forward. Bank statements, transfers to a credit union she hadn't known he'd opened. Restaurant and hotel charges threaded through months that had supposedly been swallowed by deadlines. On top, a printed still from Fern, the vanity edge. The ring of the caddy's shadow, a sliver of a blue striped towel, the bottom half of a woman's hand with immaculate nails reaching for a violet bottle. Colin's eyes flinched, then tried to learn stillness. "Lena, you gave someone a key to this house." Her voice was even. "You brought her here. You let her use my things. You shifted money. You made plans I wasn't in." He reached for a sentence that might both shrink and absolve. It was a mistake. It was a choice, she said. He looked at the still at the ledger at the dates lined like quiet rails. He pinched the bridge of his nose with 2 fingers and breathed the way a man breathes when trying to build time. "I can explain." She didn't ask him to. He tried anyway, pressures. Feeling invisible, the stupid cowardice of thinking a slow transfer was less a betrayal than a single large theft. His words organized themselves into a structure that resembled a scaffold and swayed like one. "I'm sorry," he finished, mouth unsteady. "I want to fix it." "Some things can be fixed," Lena said. "Not this." He looked at her then as if the fact of her refusal were the first real data point in a series he'd always assumed would regress to the mean. "Please." "You'll be staying elsewhere," she said. "Tonight." He began to reach for argument. She gave him no surface to attach to. "There's a duffel in the hall," she added. "The rest can be discussed when I'm not the only person in this room who's been honest." He stood again. "I don't have anywhere." "You do." She didn't name the place. He did not either. He crossed to the hall. The duffel waited against the baseboard, mouth open. He filled it with the methodical movements of a man who has packed for business trips and weekends away and never once rehearsed this choreography. He came back to the dining room and stopped just short of the table's edge, hands on the duffel's strap, words exhausted. She walked to the door and opened it. The night had cooled. Somewhere a sprinkler ticked like a distant metronome. He looked at her as if the doorway were a test and the grade mattered. "Can I?" "No." "Will you? This conversation is finished." He nodded once too quickly, then again slower, as if consulting an inner clerk. He stepped onto the porch. The duffel's zipper rattled like a small animal. He turned a reflex. "Lena." She closed the door. The latch found itself without drama. The house exhaled. She stood with her hand on the knob for a long breath, not as a flourish, but because bodies learn new weights slowly. Then she slid the chain, turned off the lamp, and went to the bedroom. The bed looked like a surface, not a negotiation. She lay down and listened to the city reassemble its night, a late bus sighing at the corner, a fox skimming the fence, the maple's leaves making their tiny, tireless sounds. Sleep came without ceremony. Morning arrived the way mornings do light, stippling the blinds, a sparrow testing the sill, the refrigerator's motor clearing its throat. She washed the sheets. She wiped the vanity. She set the violet bottle in the trash and took it to the bin behind the garage. She opened the windows and let the house air itself as if it had been holding its breath. Days passed with the pragmatic click of things being done. Paperwork acquired signatures. Keys changed hands. Games of polite phone tag turned into scheduled calls where the weather was noted, and the necessary sentences said themselves. Iris showed up with grocery basics and a crooked bouquet that smelled like a roadside Queen Anne's lace and something that had volunteered in a ditch. Lena put the flowers in a jar and didn't try to make them stand straighter than they wanted. The rooms learned their new quiet. The fern unfurled a fresh frond as if to mark a page. On the shelf where the camera had sat, the ceramic reeds went into a drawer and did not come out again. The app named Fern stayed on Lena's phone as a square she didn't tap, then moved to a folder she didn't open. Summer edged into itself and then gave way. The maple left small brown hands in every gutter on the block. Work gathered around her and made a shape she recognized clients who said thank you, and meant it. Projects that put clean things into the world and didn't call them more than they were. Evenings acquired their own gravity, a neighbor's dog to be returned when it discovered gaps in fences, Iris knocking at odd hours with Peach's silence that didn't perform. Months later, how many mattered less than the fact of their passing? Lena unlocked the glass door of a second-floor studio above a print shop and flipped on lights that warmed to full in a breath. She had painted the walls a white with a little warmth in it, the kind that forgave cloudy days. 2 desks faced the windows. A long table held a large format printer and a row of paper swatches that made their own subdued parade. On the wall, a framed piece of tracing paper marked up in pencil had become art by accident notes for a navigation pattern that had solved something small and real. She watered a plant under the window, a cousin of the fern, brighter too optimistic, and set a mug under the kettle. The kettle obliged. She drank, answered 2 emails, and looked out at the street where the same delivery truck misjudged the same corner twice a week. The bell on the stair clicked. Iris appeared with a paper bag that gave off the warm, yeasty smell of a good morning. Bagels, she said, and 4 different ways to ruin cream cheese. Also a person in the stairwell who said she might be interrupting, and then decided she didn't mind. A shadow moved in the frosted glass. Iris raised her eyebrows in a question that was also a warning and stepped aside. The woman who came in wore her hair in a close, precise cut that made no apologies. Sable looked smaller without distance, fine-boned, careful in her movements, dressed plainly in a way that suggested attention had grown heavy to carry. She held her hands like someone arriving without a script. "Hi, Lena," she said, voice low. I asked Iris if this was okay. Lena set her mug down. "It's fine." Sable stood just inside the door, eyes traveling the room, not as a deflection, but as if cataloging the fact that the world contained spaces she hadn't known how to imagine. "I wanted to say I'm sorry. To you, not to some idea of you. I kept thinking it would be easier to email and then decided easy didn't belong here." Lena waited. The kettle ticked as it cooled again. Iris busied herself noisily with the bagels at the back table, the choreography of someone providing privacy inside a shared room. "I'm working," Sable said, a small wry hitch to the word. "Different kind. Assisting at a studio. Light lenses, things that don't ask me to be the thing being looked at." "My hair." She touched the neat line above her jaw. "Is fine now. It isn't what it was." "That's all right." Lena nodded once. She did not offer absolution she hadn't been asked for. She did not give more of herself than she meant. Sable's eyes flooded, cleared. "You don't owe me anything," she said. "I just needed to say it to the person who was actually there." "Thank you," Lena said. Sable breathed as if she'd put down a heavy bag. "Okay." She glanced at the tracing paper on the wall and smiled, a small human thing. "That's beautiful." She left with a nod to Iris, the bell on the stair giving it soft approval. Iris brought over a bagel piled with strawberries and a reckless amount of jam. "You all right?" "Yes." It was true in the ordinary way the best truths are. They ate the paper, crackling the window, admitting a light that had bothered to travel. When Iris left, Lena moved through the studio's small content orbit. She answered another email, taped a new paper swatch to the wall, beside the others, watered the plant again, because she had been told it liked to be fussed over. Later in the apartment, she now rented 2 blocks from the park. She showered and reached for a drugstore bottle that smelled like green tea and cost less than a lunch. She set it back in its place and turned off the bathroom light. In the bedroom, the maple's cousin outside her window made a different sound than the old tree had, but the language was the same. She lay down. The room held steady around her. The night did what nights do. The door was shut. The table elsewhere collected morning sun. Thank you so much for listening to today's story. If this story resonated with you or made you reflect, I'd love to hear your thoughts, so feel free to share them in the comments below. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the next story. I'll see you next time as we continue exploring more journeys and lessons together.